Did you know Golden Axe was originally inspired by Conan the Barbarian and Dungeons and Dragons campaigns? Before it became a Mega Drive classic, it was an arcade powerhouse that combined fantasy, brutal combat, and even some controversy. Today, we're diving into the history of Golden Axe, how it was made, why it mattered, and the surprising legacy it left behind. Golden Axe first appeared in 1989 as an arcade beat-em-up, created by Sega's legendary AM1 team. This was the same creative unit behind Altered Beast and Shinobi. Sega wanted a fantasy-themed game to rival Capcom's Final Fight, but instead of gang warfare, they turned to swords, sorcery, and dragons. The arcade cabinet was a big hit. Players loved the simple but satisfying formula: side-scrolling action, hacking through hordes of enemies, and, most memorably, the magic system. Each character had a unique spell meter, powered by those little blue magic pots, which encouraged different playstyles. Later in 1989, Golden Axe was ported to the Sega Mega Drive, known as the Genesis in North America. This version became one of the console's early killer apps. While not identical to the arcade, the Mega Drive had limitations. It was still considered one of the most faithful arcade-to-home conversions of the time. The Mega Drive version also included something the arcade didn't: an exclusive extra level and a true final boss fight against Deathbringer, making the home version feel even more rewarding. Golden Axe featured 3 playable heroes, all modeled after Western fantasy tropes with a Japanese twist. Axe Battler, the barbarian warrior, clearly inspired by Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan. Despite the name Axe, he actually wields a sword. Tyris Flare, the Amazonian heroine, clad in a red bikini armor design, very much in line with 1980s fantasy art. She had the strongest magic attacks, making her a favorite among fans. Gilius Thunderhead, the dwarf with a giant axe, who provided both comic relief and brutal melee damage. The villain, Death Adder, was a classic armored Dark Lord who kidnaps the king and princess. The archetypal setup for a fantasy quest. One of the most interesting mechanics was the ability to ride creatures, from fire-breathing dragons to giant chicken-legged beasts called Bizarrians. This feature added chaos and strategy to battles, and it became one of the game's trademarks. The magic system also stood out. Tyris could summon a dragon to scorch the battlefield, Axe Battler unleashed powerful earth magic, and Gilius used lightning storms. These flashy effects were jaw-dropping at the time, especially on home consoles. While Golden Axe wasn't as heavily controversial as Mortal Kombat a few years later, it did stir some minor criticism. The game's violence, hacking enemies, riding beasts into crowds, and using giant swords was considered intense for 1989. Tyris Flare's revealing design also drew occasional complaints. But in the late 80s, fantasy artwork like this was standard. Interestingly, some critics felt the game was too brutal compared to Nintendo's family-friendly offerings, which helped cement Sega's image as the edgier brand. This identity would later explode in the Genesis versus SNES console wars. Director Makoto Uchida, who also created Altered Beast, was deeply inspired by Western fantasy movies. He once revealed that Golden Axe was directly influenced by Conan the Barbarian and his personal Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. Because of hardware limitations, the development team had to carefully design sprite sizes. For example, the rideable beasts were intentionally small, so the Mega Drive hardware could handle multiple on-screen without slowing down. Another fun fact, Uchida originally wanted 4 playable characters, but due to memory restrictions, they had to cut one out. The remaining 3 became iconic in their own right. When Golden Axe launched on the Mega Drive, it was a huge success. Reviewers praised its faithful arcade feel, its cooperative 2-player mode, and its strong fantasy aesthetic. It quickly became a staple of Sega's early library, helping to sell consoles in both Japan and the West. The game spawned sequels, including Golden Axe 2, 1991, and Golden Axe 3, 1993. While those sequels had fans, most critics agree the original was the strongest entry. There was even a spin-off, Golden Axe, Beast Rider, released in 2008 for Xbox 360 and PS3, but it was poorly received and is widely considered a misstep. Golden Axe became more than just a game. It helped define the beat-em-up genre in the late 80s and early 90s. Alongside Streets of Rage, it established Sega as a master of arcade-style action games. It also influenced countless later titles. The idea of mixing hack-and-slash fantasy combat with rideable creatures and magic inspired other developers in Japan and the West. To this day, retro collections almost always include Golden Axe, showing its lasting popularity. Golden Axe wasn't just another beat-em-up. It was Sega's bold attempt to bring sword and sorcery to arcades and living rooms. Its mix of brutal combat, fantasy setting, and cooperative gameplay made it unforgettable. And over 30 years later, it's still one of the crown jewels of the Mega Drive. If you enjoyed this look back, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And let me know in the comments. Which hero did you play as first? Axe Battler, Tyris Flare, or Gilius Thunderhead?